So here to talk about color 1.5, please welcome back to the table, Andrew Balis.
So I was trying to figure out how to approach color 1.5. There are no breakthrough brand new features in color 1.5. But I'm curious how many people out here are actually using color right now? That's great. For those of you that are using color, you're going to find it great, the upgrade, because what it does is it just makes your life easier. Again, there are no breakthrough standout features, but they've really kind of just massaged it, sweetened it, and made it kind of more efficient for you. One of the first things, and I'm going to see just how much I can cover. I'm not sure that I will be able to cover everything in 20-25 minutes, but let's start with some of the obvious things. The first thing is finally a vector scope that actually looks like a real vector scope. And actually behaves like a real vector scope. In other words, you actually see your legal limit for colors a lot more accurately now in this new vector scope. You may know that if you click with your scroll wheel, that you can zoom in or out on the different video scopes, including the waveform monitor. And this gets people into trouble with the waveform monitor because in color 1.0, if you tried zooming, well, the graticules, in other words, the markings stayed where they were, but all of a sudden, the spikes started expanding. So you had no idea if your signal was legal or not. Now, when you zoom in on the scope, the scale expands with it. So basically, why would we even want to zoom in on the waveform monitor? Because it's showing you your blacks. It's zooming in on the bottom part of the scope, so it's showing you just how much your blacks are crushed or not. It's kind of debatable if you really, really zoom all the way in just how much better information you are than if you're here, but at least you can see the markings changed. One of the other changes they made to the waveform monitor is kind of crucial in that specs that you'll get for broadcast standards are listed in millivolts, not IRE. And the scale so far has just been listed in IRE values. Now I can't actually show this on this monitor, so I'm going to have to change display modes because you cannot work on color on a 15-inch MacBook Pro. I'm sorry, it just does not support all the features. And it even warns you now. It comes up and says, "Ooh, you're messing with fire." Okay, I may be exaggerating exactly what it's saying. But let me just quick reopen color in a format that it likes. Just real briefly, just so you can at least see this change in the scopes. So basically, I kind of faked it out, telling it I had two monitors. So now, when we can see our scopes, you can see over here, there's an IRE versus millivolt setting. So I can switch to millivolts and see exactly that scale setting. Now, that's all right, except that broadcast safe settings are still listed in IRE values, which makes no sense whatsoever. So you may be able to view the waveform monitor, but they just need to take it one step further and let you be able to set your broadcast safe settings in millivolts. Because if you'll notice, as soon as this relaunches, in a tab of color called the project settings is where you choose your broadcast safe settings. Basically, even though it's not showing millivolts, don't consider this IRE values because IRE is a function of the analog world. Just think of this as percentage levels. You're aiming for 0 and 100%. That maps out to Rec 601 and Rec 709 values properly. It's just that it uses analog terminology. Anyway, let's look at some other stuff. One of the things that I really like about the new version of color is that in the previous version of color, when you started making corrections, you should be able to expect to see little bars show up in your timeline showing you what you've actually done. You've actually done some work. You can see over here, there's certain bars that are showing up that tell me that I've done work in various parts of the interface. Well, it used to be in color up to color 104, you'd only see a bar show up if you started to play your clip or if you moved the playhead off the clip and came back again. That's kind of silly. Now, as soon as you touch anything, a bar shows up. And even better, for those of you that use the secondaries, you know that there's, in the secondaries where you can isolate regions of the image, there's a button in the room called Enable. It's a little hard to see some of the features because when you display it on such a small interface, it keeps shrinking down the text to make it squeeze on the screen. But this button says Enable. And basically, in previous versions, you'd start messing around doing all kinds of corrections in this room, you'd never see anything. Worse yet, you'd already have a correction, but the box was unchecked, and you start screwing up a previous correction because you didn't realize you temporarily disabled the room. Well, now, as soon as you touch anything in this room, it automatically enables the room. So that's cool. Little tiny things that just make your life easier. All right, now one of the things I've just let me just make a really horrendous correction real fast. Now, for those that use color, how do you turn what you've done on or off? How can you see the before image? Control-G is a keyboard shortcut, but it turns off everything all throughout the timeline. And if you don't know that that's turned off, then you can easily start messing up previous corrections. Now when you hit Control-G, you actually see something in the timeline. You know your grade is disabled. You know for a fact you are not looking at the final deal right now. And so now when you turn on Control-G, you can see that you are. One of the nice little additions that they've done in Color 1.5 is adding more keyboard shortcuts that us Final Cut Pro users are familiar with. We've always had the up and down arrow keys, which move us from edit point to edit point, just like in Final Cut. We've had left and right arrow keys, home and end. But now you've also got things like Shift-Z, fit to window. Or things like, and I know this might not sound like a big deal, but let me zoom in a little bit. Now we've also got Command plus and minus as a way to zoom in, which I just kind of worked around right there by doing it the long way. But let's say I had marked a very specific in point and out point, and I wanted to simply jump back and forth between them. Well, what are the keyboard shortcuts in Final Cut for that? Shift-I, Shift-O. So that all works as well. We've also got things that are incredibly important when you're trying to copy your work from one shot to other shots. We've now got things like, I know this might not sound like a big deal, but Command-A actually selects all now. And Command-Shift-A actually deselects all. Those commands were in the previous version of Color, they just didn't do anything. It was nice, it was pretty, you just kept hitting it, and you're like, nothing's changing, I don't get it. So those are nice little things. But definitely one of the kind of the standout features is going to require just a tiny bit of understanding the color interface. If you know anything about color, you know that color is divided into different tabs, which Apple calls rooms. And basically in each room, you can think of each room as like a different layer of color correction. And so you're kind of stacking these different layers. The advantage of it is that you can create much more sophisticated effects than if everything was done in just one particular place. Well, when you do work in any of these individual tabs, as well as, by the way, being able to strip the work off that you do in one room without affecting the work that you do in other rooms, or being able to add work in one room without affecting other rooms. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. Well, whenever you start doing work in any of these rooms, you get little bars that show up in the timeline. Let me zoom out a little bit. That was a little extreme. And it indicates which rooms you've done effects in. So color calls a grade a combination of everything you do in all the rooms. That's what this word grade 1 stands for. It says, everything I've done on this clip is this grade. But inside of it, I've got a primary in-room correction, which is, in this particular shot, the overall contrast and the warm tone that I've given the scene. But then there's also two things in here called S1 and S2. Those are for different secondaries. I'm going to turn off the secondary so we can see this real quick. Hold on, let me get over here. One of the secondaries was simply just to, let me just turn this bar off, was simply just to kind of add a little bit of vignette to kind of darken the edges of the frame. And then I've got another secondary, because you can do up to 8 secondaries per room. This is something called an HSL key, which was used just to kind of enhance the yellow of her shirt a little. All right, so that was done on this clip. Well, on this other clip, over here, there was a secondary done in room 8 to use a hue curve control to change the color of the wall behind it. All right. Well, if I'm going to, let's say, do certain work on shots, chances are I'm going to want to copy some or all of that work from one shot to others. Like, for example, I want to copy, all of my work from one shot to every other shot at the same angle. But shots of different angles, I might want to copy some of the work, but not all of it. Now color, I keep hearing about color supports, dragging to copying and dragging selected grades. I think what's more powerful is the fact that you can copy and drag individual parts of your work, not just the whole thing. Now, there's always in color been like 5 different ways that you could copy and save and reapply your work downstream. There are these grade maps that if you're using a control surface, you're going to map it to a control surface to copy a grade from one shot, you get to another shot, you paste the grade to a different shot. When you're working with a mouse, there's all kinds of different ways. But the problem is they're in different tabs, so you constantly have to switch back and forth to different rooms just to access these different corrections. Well, now we can do a lot just by dragging. For example, I've got another shot that's the same angle as this, so I might want to drag this entire grade over to the shot. Now that's something we've always been able to do. I'm going to undo that. What's new is that I can command click on a group of those, and when I drag, it drags it all. Now that's cool, but if I did it over here to this shot, that would be a bad idea, because when you copy a grade, you're wiping out everything that was previously on that shot, and you are replacing it with whatever is in the new grade. I don't want to do that. I don't want to blow away that secondary grade, and I did something in something called the color effects room to reduce grain. So I actually don't want to copy everything. If I copy the whole grade, I'd wipe all that work out. I'm going to undo that instead, and by the way, I've got to be really careful now in color about what stays selected. Because I have definitely, even though it's nice that you can select a group of shots, either by command clicking or shift clicking, if you don't realize something is still selected, even copying between one grade on a shot and another grade on the same shot, all of a sudden you start wiping out other corrections on other shots. There is no undo for that. That is a huge thing to put in a feature request for, because that to me is not, that happened to me and it blew away a few shots of work that I had done. Anyway, don't cry for me, I promise I'll get by. But what we can do as well is, let's say I wanted to select this, I've got another angle of the same shot. Instead of copying the whole grade this time, I could actually copy just the primary end bar, just the secondaries that I want to copy. So I leave just the things that I want and copy just the things that I want. And again, the whole point is we've always been able to drag, but only to one shot at a time. There was always different ways to copy on multiple shots, but from different rooms, and only select the things in different rooms. So this is a nice improvement here. Command Shift A, deselect all, that's nice. All right, let's talk about other copy and paste features. Let me close this sequence and open another. If you're working with interlace footage in color, and you work in this part of color called color effects room, you know that you have to treat interlace footage carefully, because color basically treats everything as progressive footage. And now, for certain color effects, that's fine. But when in the color effects room, you also have ways of displacing pixels, either by blurring, sharpening, and other things I can't think of right now. But there's ways of displacing pixels, and when you do that to interlace footage, you kind of mush the fields. So I've created in here this look through this thing called a node tree. And all these different little things are basically all different parts of the final effect. Their nodes are kind of in Final Cut what we would call a video filter. But all these things together create the look. The problem is this is an interlaced timeline. So I need to basically have 2 node trees that are identical to one another, one for each field. I need to split the fields, do a node tree for one, do a node tree for the other, in the end, recombine them. Oof, that's a pain. All right, now, not anymore, because now I've already added a deinterlace node so that I have kind of a way to split off part of the image. So I've already created an even side to this node tree. I need to create an odd side to the node tree. So I'm going to select the nodes that I want, Command C to copy, Command V to paste, and boom. And so now I can grab this, copy that, come over here, paste it, attach it, change what it is. And in this case, because it is interlaced footage, I do need to, at the end, kind of recombine the footage. Now, this one thing I didn't, this vignette over here, I didn't duplicate because If you don't know, nodes can always be broken off in two different directions. So in this case, I could use that same node twice. Now that's not due to color 1.5. The point is, you don't copy everything. You copy only the things that you'd have to duplicate on the other side. And then in the end, the only thing you need to do is re-interlace. And just make sure that you're re-interlacing the odd side to the odd side and the even side to the even side. But that would have taken a lot longer if I had to rebuild each node from scratch. And anytime you change anything, a blur or this or that, you'd have to do it again. So this particular thing was just to kind of blur and darken the edges of the frame. But that would have taken definitely more time if we didn't have copy and paste in the color effects room. So that's nice. Now, one of the things that people are probably interested in knowing is how color is now round tripping better with Final Cut. Let's just say a little bit better, but they took one step forward and another step back, another direction. So here I've got a sequence where we've got a motion project. We've got a freeze frame on video track 2. So it's going to play like this. It gets this freeze frame and it just pauses on it. And at the end, there's another freeze frame at the end of this little mini part of the sequence where it just kind of ends on Caroline here smiling. All right, there's problems with this. These are unsupported. Although graphics and freeze frames are now supported in color 1.5, you got to be careful. If I have a freeze frame on track 2, it's not supported. If I have a freeze frame with a transition on it, it's not supported. So I've also got a second part of this timeline where the freeze frame doesn't have the transition and the other freeze frame is embedded right on B1. Now the other thing, so that we can see how it goes into color and how it comes back out. Now I've also got a graphic here for Moviola. Yes, we do have 3-day classes in Apple's color. Now anyway, I did want to show this graphic. It was the only quick thing I swear I did not do that on purpose. I was literally, I came to it just because I put it up. No, I didn't, but we'll talk later. This graphic has an alpha, and what's nice about it is you can take a graphic with an alpha into color and get it back out. What can't you take into color, at least reliably right now? Full PSDs. So if you take a full Photoshop file, it either doesn't come back connected to the media properly, or it's all completely screwed up. So just want to make you aware of that. Now I'm going to send this sequence to color. And I've already got one pre-rendered out, so I'll just show you kind of approximately what I did in color. All right, so we see our freeze frame here on B2. Now let's say we just did something really, really simple, like just made the whole thing black and white, a little heavier contrast. All right, just really, really quick. Now I'm going to select, shift select. By the way, here's an interesting new thing in color. It used to be that you could shift select from left to right, but you couldn't shift select from right to left. Now you can. I know it might not seem like a big deal to you that haven't used color, but if you use color, that's a big deal. All right, so I'm going to just drag this correction onto these other shots, and also drag it onto that freeze frame. And we'll see also here we've got a graphic. I'm going to go into the secondaries, and again, don't need to enable the room. I'm just going to go into the hue curves and just manipulate, whoops, not that. Let me reset that. And I'm going to just change the red of that globe to something else. I need a wider span here. Whoops. All right. So let's see what happens to this. Now, we've also got the second part of the sequence where everything, whoops, actually that's not what I meant to do, but don't worry because it's already been rendered out. I've also got the second part of the sequence where the freeze frame, and I want you to pay attention to the freeze frame. I want you to notice when I play it, that it freezes on a guy with his thumb held up. And then it goes back into the scene. And again, the same thing with Caroline, it freezes on her smiling. All right. I'm pointing this out for a reason, I promise. Okay, now I'm going to copy this correction. All right, so all these clips have this correction. Now, when it renders out in color, this is what we get in Final Cut. When we send it back to Final Cut, now here is the rendered version. Everything's black and white, everything's holding up fine until we get to to freeze frame. First of all, it's not only not color corrected, it's the wrong frame now. So be careful. The reason I brought this up is specific. It's great that color does support new stuff now, but be aware of what you're doing. Be aware of where it's supporting things and where it's not. You cannot do freeze frames on anything other than V1. Graphics seem to be fine on any track, again, as long as they're not layered PSDs. Here's the freeze frame from Caroline. She plays and then ends up in a completely different freeze frame. On the other hand, we do it correctly, the way Apple suggests, and it works fine. And here's the other freeze frame. That worked fine. And the tip with the alpha came back on V2 or V1. So that's all working good. Now, I do have to say, this is where I definitely have a tiny little bit of a beef with the new support, is that they broke things that previously worked. And I was really kind of debating how to state that, but I guess I just did. It used to be that you could send motion effects, things that you did on the motion tab of color. Like, for example, here we've got a sequence of just a simple split screen. There is rotation, center, scale, there is cropping, there is a drop shadow on these shots, and when it comes back from color, that's what it looks like. That to me is pretty bad, because the XML was always tracking the data going from color and back. When you take these sequences into color, let me open that up. The thing is that you won't see all the work that you did on the motion tab. You'll see some of it. You'll see the scaling. You'll see the rotation. You'll see the center point change. That stuff is being kind of interpreted in the room called the geometry room. And so it's tracking this information. Even though it's using different values inside color, when it comes back to Final Cut, all those things are still intact, as long as you don't touch them in color. So keyframed effects, you can't do a keyframe pan and scan effect in color and send it back to QuickTime, send it back to Final Cut. You can render it out as DPXs or Cineons, but you can't send it back to Final Cut. But you've always been, as if color existed since the beginning of time, but at least for color 1.0 to 1.04, you were able to send a keyframe motion tab effect from Final Cut to color. If you didn't touch it in color, when you came back to Final Cut, it was still intact. Now the keyframes are completely blown away. And you can see that at least in this sequence, that when we came back into Final Cut, that it did not recreate it perfectly. It kept track of the cropping, it kept track of the drop shadow, the rotation, the scaling was all perfect, center point was off. Now, is this happening globally? No. Here's another example of the split screen that I did. Here's when it came back from color. Exactly correct. What to take away from it? Well, there's some kind of inconsistency there that kind of concerns me a little bit. I don't know where they're going wrong or exactly, you know, how prevalent it is. But the first sequence was DVC Pro HD. This one was ProRes. Does it have to do with one has a non-square pixel aspect ratio and one has a square pixel aspect ratio? I couldn't tell you. I haven't done enough tests with that. But it is blowing away keyframes. Now, let's get back to the good stuff, okay? One last thing. Let's take a look at some red footage. Now, here's a clip that was brought in through Final Cut's log and transfer window and brought in as what's referred to as native. And it's what we refer to as a wrapped R3D. In other words, it's basically the original red red code raw imagery that's simply just been copied into a QuickTime shell. Now, inside Final Cut, you're going to see that, let's see, as a 2K clip and a 2K sequence. But when you send it to color, it's also initially seen as a 2K sequence. Now, I want you to notice, though, in the geometry room in color, it lists the scale setting at 2. Well, that's interesting. I wonder why it does that. All right. Well, in the setup room, in the project settings, when you output from color, as a general rule of thumb, everything you do to affect how color outputs is you should only, as a general rule of thumb, ever touch QuickTime export codec. That's what affects frame size, pixel aspect ratio, and the codec that gets used for rendering out a color.
You may also be presented by another dialog box afterwards. As a general rule of thumb, never, ever, ever touch resolution preset, except with red footage. Because if you need a 4K output, it is seeing the full 4K image. If I change this from 2K to 4K, I get a box saying, do you want color to automatically scale my clips to the new sequence resolution? I choose yes, and I can now output 4K. So, not to Final Cut, but to DPX or Cineon if I was going for a film mount. The one last thing is, if I have just, do I have 2 minutes? Okay. The one last thing is a feature that they seem to have improved on, which was a reconform feature, where if you, I'm going to send this sequence to color. Just name it. Now, just so that I'm not wasting your time, I've already kind of pre-saved some effects to throw on these, so I'm just going to really quickly apply some looks. The problem is when you start color correcting, you never end up being able to just start color correcting and assume the picture is completely locked and done. Chances are at some point along the way, someone's going to say, we need to re-edit. Well, the reconform feature in color was way less than reliable in color 1.0. Got much more stable in 104, but still something I wouldn't exactly recommend. But I'm going to leave color, go back to Final Cut, and re-edit this sequence real briefly. I'm going to remove a clip. Let's say I'll remove this one, do a ripple delete on that. I'll ripple this one a little shorter. I'll do a swap edit somewhere here. And let's maybe ripple this one a little shorter as well. All right, now what I'm going to do to reconform is export an XML file. And now I'm going to go back into color, and then let's see if it reconforms properly. What I'm going to do is open the original sequence that I just created. Okay, here's the sequence. And I'm going to go to File, Reconform. I'm going to choose that XML document, if I can find it. There it is. And did it do it? The right correction is on the right shots. And if we look in the Shots tab, you'll see that there used to be 5 shots. It even lists them in the same ordering that it used to be. So there's missing shot 4, right? Because you see it goes 1, 2, 3, 5. It tells you what it did to the clips. It shortened, it moved, and content shift. Nice. It actually works now. Now, is it completely 100% reliable? I haven't done enough testing to say whether I'd really trust it on a full show yet, but it seems a lot more rock solid than it was in 104. So that's basically the new features in Color 1.5.